My name's Charlie Lee, so I'm a gastroenterologist here in Edinburgh. Thanks very much for coming and joining us this evening. We have assembled a panel together to look very specifically at answering your questions on COVID-19 and vaccination in the context of IBD, Crohn's and colitis. And I'm very, very grateful to Crohn's and Colitis UK for hosting this live Facebook chat. This live Facebook chat, which is designed to answer your questions. Your questions can be addressed in the chat function. Many of you have already asked them in advance. We are going to do our very best to answer all the questions we can today live, and we will provide signposting throughout to the information that is available on the Crohn's and Colitis UK website. You should already be able to see in the chat page some comments directing you to that. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the panel, and then we are going to have a bit of extra background, and then we will kick off straight away. So first up, joining me tonight is Seb.
Hi there, I'm Sebastian. I'm one of the gastroenterologists from Holland, East Yorkshire. Very happy to join this important debate today.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us, Seb. And then next we've got Nick.
Hey, Nick Powell, I'm a gastroenterologist at Imperial College in London, and very excited to participate in what I think is a pretty important subject for us all.
And Peter?
Hi, Peter Irving, gastroenterologist from Guy's and Thomas's in London, also delighted to be here.
And then last but by no means least, we've got Lisa. Lisa, who is muted. There we go.
I'm a nurse consultant at St Mark's Hospital, and I also work a day a week with Crohn's and Colitis UK as their nursing programme officer.
Great
to be here.
Thank you, everyone. So it's been an extraordinary year. Of course, we know that, and it's been for many of us a very scary year, a very difficult year, a year full of ups and downs and hard work and insecurities, and that I know has affected everyone on very many different levels. I really hope now that what we can do this evening is actually share with you our hope and our optimism moving forward on the back of the vaccines that are now becoming available through different stages of approval, etc., against COVID. Because I really do sense, and I know my panel tonight share this sentiment, that we are at the start of the exit to this. We have come on here before and said that science would be our exit strategy from the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is totally turning out to be the case. And I think it's very timely that we do this tonight with the approvals having come through from the MHRA last week. And today, really, I think it's being dubbed V-Day, Vaccination Day, as you will have no doubt seen from the extensive coverage that we are seeing. What we're aiming to do tonight is answer your questions and concerns of people living with Crohn's and colitis around the COVID vaccines. We're going to do our very best to answer the questions that are there. There are things that we just don't know yet. And I want to be very careful that we don't make you concerned where we don't know things. We're just going to be open and honest and transparent with everything that we can say and do. There are some things that we don't yet know because we don't yet know what the regulators are going to say, but we will bring together everything that we are currently aware of. We do understand that people have concerns about the COVID vaccine. I think it's safe to say that we are all very strongly in favour, and all of us will be looking to get vaccinated at the earliest possible opportunity. I can say that from my side, through a quirk of the way the system is set up in Scotland with healthcare professionals getting vaccinated soon, that I will be getting vaccinated for the first dose on Thursday this week, and doing that as a way of helping to promote the safety of the vaccinations that we have there. We will not really be entertaining any anti-vax sentiment tonight. During this event, we will be doing our very best to stick to the science and the evidence as it is available. Okay, so moving on first of all. Nick, can I come to you first? Can you just give us a very brief introduction to the vaccines that are available for COVID-19?
Sure, thanks, Charlie. Two general points I wanted to make before that. And the first is that vaccination, I think we have to consider generally as one of the big success stories for humanity. It's a really important innovation, over the last 100 years, and the WHO estimate that 10 million lives were saved between 2010 and 15 for all vaccines. So it's a majorly important thing. And the second point I just wanted to say before I address that is that the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine story, I think, will be regarded as one of mankind's greatest ever achievements. I don't think that's hyperbolic, especially in the sort of time frame that we've sort of seen. Now, to your specific question, I think there are 3 vaccines we need to really have on our radar. The first one is the Pfizer vaccine, the second one is the Moderna vaccine, and the third one is the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. So those are the 3 that are very likely to see daylight with us very soon, and you'll know that, of course, Pfizer has been rolled out already. Just quickly touching on how they work, if you want me to address that. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are very, very similar. They're basically called mRNA vaccines, and the way in which they work, they contain a bit of nucleic acid, a molecule that when it enters into the body, when it's injected into the muscle, it encodes a protein that is actually a component of the virus itself. So our body will make that, just the protein, of course, not the virus, and then we can mount an immune response against it and protect ourselves should we ever be exposed to the virus itself. And that's both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine work on that premise. The Oxford vaccine is a little bit different, and there's a number of other vaccines coming through which are a bit similar. So these are called adenovirus vectors. So they're not full virus particles, so to speak, and they have the, if you like, the backbone and the scaffolding of a virus particle. But the really key important thing about them is that they've been manipulated to not be able to replicate. So they do not replicate inside the body, and in that sense, they're not really live vaccines. They've also been manipulated so they also express one of those proteins, one of those components of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So again, your body will then make lots of this protein, and should you ever then come in contact with the virus itself, you've built up immunity to that protein that's expressed by the virus.
And Nick, that's the so-called spike protein, which gives the COVID or the SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, its characteristic appearance. Is that right?
Exactly right. And the spike protein is a very good thing to target, of course, because that's the bit of the virus that docks into the cells of the body that it then infects. So that's the key to these vaccines being successful, I expect.
So the vaccines work in slightly different ways. That even the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines that are the same technology have slightly different delivery, I think, vehicles with them. But all 3 of these target the same part of the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
Exactly right. That's spike protein. That's the one that really makes the virus shine out to the immune system, and then the immune system can mount in a response and defend itself against the virus. Yeah, absolutely right.
Great. Before we move on into further details, I'm going to go to sort of Peter and then to Seb, just in terms of some introductory thoughts and comments following on from what Nick has said. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Nick on the 2 really important points he said. First is that vaccination is just such an important path of public health and has been shown to improve the life of humanity over the years, and that this story of what has been achieved in the last 10 months is just astonishing, absolutely incredible. I'd also say, personally, I have taken part in vaccine trials for a number of reasons. Firstly, because, like Charlie, I want to put my money where my mouth is and say I believe this is safe technology. Even in trial phase, I was happy to say that. Secondly, actually, because it was my chance to, if you like, repay a little bit to all those patients of mine who've put themselves through trials over the years, which I'm hugely grateful. And it was sort of my turn to maybe help in some way in getting vaccines to approval as soon as possible. So I have to admit, I don't know whether I've had the vaccine or not. I rather hope I have, but I'll find out at some point, I think.
Thanks, Peter. And of course, in London, you, as well as you in Hull, Seb, have had really very difficult time of it with COVID-19, and I wonder, Seb, what your sort of hopes and expectations are now moving forwards from an area that has been particularly hard hit during the pandemic.
Yes, absolutely, Charlie. In fact, what I was going to echo what Nick said, that the speed at which you have reached this milestone, in my view, it's a big turning point, is incredible. And a lot of that is down to the necessity, because we are seeing people dying, high death rates, people being affected by it. So necessity breeds invention, and this is a true success story of this vaccine. I'm also incredibly encouraged by what Nick told earlier, that there are two different mRNA, messenger RNA vaccines and the Oxford vaccine, and whatever we know about the results, they are almost identical. So that gives me even further reassurance that these vaccines are good, and despite different, slightly different makings of those, they have similar efficacy, which is incredibly powerful for me to consider taking any of them which are offered to me right now.
Thanks, Seb. Lisa, one of the things and one of the reasons why we scrambled to put this on relatively quickly is that we were hearing lots of questions and comments coming through. Certainly from my clinic, pretty much every patient's been asking, what do I think? Should I get the vaccine, etc., etc. We certainly heard that from Crohn's and Colitis UK. I wonder, without necessarily diving into too much of the questions themselves, because we're going to aim to go through them one by one. If you can just give us a flavour of what that's been like from the other end of the helpline, the types of questions that have been coming through, the rapidity of that, because the patients know how to get in touch with us now, and we're doing our very best to deal with that.
Absolutely. I think the majority of the questions that have been coming through are really quite sensible and practical and reasonable questions. Again, I would echo everything that's been said already, but to have a disease and a pandemic that's caused the upset that it has to the world, and then for a vaccine to be found so quickly is absolutely amazing, but it does make people feel a little bit nervous. And I guess our patients with their immunosuppressants and their underlying conditions, and if we all think back to March when that was all over the news about how you didn't have to worry about this unless you had an underlying condition, and how unhelpful that probably was for people living with conditions like Crohn's and colitis. I think it's reasonable. They want to know whether it's safe. They want to know whether it's going to be effective. They want to know whether they should be putting themselves on sort of registers to try and get it sooner. Or whether they can wait for it to just kind of roll out as it does for everybody else. So hopefully those are the kind of things we can address here. And we're definitely signposting our patients to Crohn's and colitis, who've been fantastic all the way through and a really good source of support and information.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Lisa. So, Nick, to you first, just this sort of general comments on what we expect for the vaccines for people with IBD, for Crohn's and colitis, and on immunosuppressants.
So obviously we need all the guidance from the regulators, but we do have guidance from the regulators for the Pfizer vaccine, of course. So that has been approved by our regulator. And of course, that's a really important point to stress. The regulatory bodies in the UK, like the ones in Europe, like the ones in the States, are really rigorous. These are the brightest and best scientific and clinical minds in the country who sit down with every little bit of data that is available, every bit of data. They cut no corners, and they assess things like they do every single drug that comes anywhere near a patient, and they assess everything. And safety is paramount to that question, of course. And at the moment, the regulator has said, and this is great news, I think, for our patients, that our patients will be accessible for this vaccine. It's not a contraindication. we could possibly see some reduced effect of the vaccine, is the one caution that they've given. That's by no means a guarantee, of course. We'll probably touch on this again, I suspect, in a moment. Some vaccines, like the flu vaccine, we do see about a 30% reduction in the effectiveness of them. Others we don't. Things like the measles vaccine, a great vaccine. Again, it's an RNA virus, a bit like coronavirus. And you get a great vaccine response that's not necessarily impeded by the type of medicines that our patients take. So I'm sure we'll come on to the effectiveness, but in terms of safety, the suggestion is, and the feeling is, and certainly my feeling from the data we've seen so far, is that these are highly likely to be very safe products. Clearly, we don't have all the data. You know, this is a new vaccine, a new disease, and the world's in a unique space. And you've got to balance risks all the time. But, you know, I think in the overall setting, against a disease that's killed 1 in 1,000 people in the UK, a vaccine whose key side effects looks to be muscle pain, pain at the site of injection, headache, the things we see with every vaccine, of course, I think these are highly encouraging results. And one just other point to make is that all the other vaccines we've ever used that are indicated for patients on immunosuppression, we don't see major side effects from that in those patient groups either. So I don't think there's any undue reason to be overly worried or cautious, other than beyond the natural caution that we should all have as human beings, as doctors and patients, when undergoing any new treatment.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I wonder if we can just discuss briefly the kinds of people that have had the vaccines, because I think there is, you know, someone's asked, has the vaccine been tested on people on immunosuppressants? What kind of people have had it? Lisa, do you want to come in and comment on that?
Yeah, so although there isn't any evidence of specifically people with inflammatory bowel disease in the studies, the vaccine was tested on a wide range of different ages, of all sorts of ethnic groups, also, you know, other comorbidities. So certainly people with asthma, people with diabetes, obese people, you know, elderly people, other, you know, children, a real wide range of people that took part in the vaccine studies. So I think there's definitely some reassurance to be taken from that, even if it isn't specifically our patient group that have been commented on. So
Seb, just to follow up on that, how do we know it's safe if it hasn't been given to people with Crohn's or colitis yet?
Yeah, so far what we know is that patients with Crohn's and colitis are really not any different in the broad scheme of things, except perhaps a small aspect in relation to the steroids as in the risk grade. So there is not really an additional risk added by Crohn's or colitis or its main therapy. So while it is not being tested in that particular group, I'm reassured that there is no additional risk so far being shown in any of the data which has been presented.
Thanks, Seb. Peter?
Yeah, so as promised, Charlie, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. So things like Facebook, and I think you know, we have to accept that people are worried, and they're worried about the fact that we are the first country in which the vaccine has been licensed, and someone has said here that they're worried that we're being used as guinea pigs. We're the first country to get the vaccine. The individuals on biologics, and they're worried that perhaps the medicine that they're taking could make side effects from the vaccine worse.
Yeah. Nick, do you want to come in on that? I mean, I think everything that we know so far is that this won't be the case. I don't think we are being used as guinea pigs here. I think it's, from my point of view, it's definitely worth bearing in mind that this isn't a vaccine that's been tested on 1 or 2 people. These are tens of thousands of people that have been tested with these vaccines. And I think that's really important to state. Nick, do you want to come in specifically about the question about immunosuppressants?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say I think it's actually a great tribute to our regulator that we have approved the vaccine first. The others will follow suit, of course, very shortly. I don't doubt that. And as you say, the Pfizer vaccine alone has been tested in over 40,000 patients. So, you know, a massive vaccine. sort of study. What I would say is that people taking immunosuppressants, they're asking a very good question. And my concern with immunosuppressants is not about necessarily the safety of the vaccine. It's that whether it works slightly less effectively. I think that's the important question to consider on immunosuppressants, and perhaps we'll kind of come back to that. The element about guinea pigs, what I'd reassure people about, in a sense, is that every medicine that an IBD patient takes outside of their IBD medicine, so if you've had paracetamol for your headache, if you've got diabetes, you take insulin, blood pressure medicines, none of those medicines have been tested specifically in IBD patients in a trial. But we assume that, and we know that they'll be kind of safe in our patients as well. And it's the same for all the other vaccines, of course, that we use in routine practice. They've never had a clinical trial in IBD patients. They've been assessed after they've been being used after a while in our patients. Of course, we will continue to monitor. That's the other thing that we shouldn't forget. There'll be a million odd healthcare professionals, I imagine, immunized before our patient groups get there. And the safety data will be actively followed and pursued on those individuals as well. So I view it as a privilege that we're getting access to this. The world's a guinea pig to coronavirus, and we know it's killing lots of people. 1 in 1,000 in America, 1 in 1,000 in the UK in just 9 months. A vaccine would have to be appalling to not be better than that. It's always balancing effects, but 1 in 1,000 deaths from coronavirus is a serious, serious problem, and a vaccine is a very welcome answer to that problem, I hope.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And I think it is really testament to some of the things that we do really well in this country. Without being nationalistic about this, we do have brilliant, medical minds and scientists, and a very, good regulatory system and framework that is in many ways the envy of the world, and I think this is just true. And the MHRA have got on and done their job to the highest possible standards, and they have stressed and strained that. It is worth noting that the FDA are meeting, I think it's on Thursday this week. This is part of their planned timeline. I think they quite wisely have not shifted their timelines just because the MHRA came out first. That is not a delay, it's just the way that the timelines have come, and I think that it is widely anticipated that their emergency use authorization of the Pfizer vaccine will follow rapidly, with, on their timelines, I think a further week away is their meeting for the Moderna vaccine. All of the data that Pfizer have produced as part of the package that was released for the MHRA to look at last week, and that the FDA are looking at, it has been put onto the public domain today. I think it is also worth saying that the Oxford vaccination study, the big study that was reported, of course, a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now, has just been published in full in the Lancet today. So there's a lot of new information that has gone in the public domain, none of which is telling us anything particularly different from what we knew before. It's just providing a bit of extra granularity on the evidence that we have seen so far. Seb, so would you recommend, Seb, that people with Crohn's or colitis have the vaccine when offered it? Simple question, simple answer, I suspect.
I can give you a straight and simple answer. Absolutely, yes. I will take the vaccine, and I will strongly encourage all of my patients to take the vaccine.
Lisa, same question to you. Would you recommend that people with Crohn's or colitis have the vaccine when offered it?
Yes, I would.
Peter?
Absolutely. I think, not only to protect themselves, but I think there's also another thing here, and that is society has suffered hugely from this. Again, it's part of the reason I took part in a trial, because I think we also, there is a moral responsibility to us towards society to protect each other, which is another reason why I think individually we should consider being vaccinated.
And finally to you, Nick, I assume that the answer is the same, but I think it's worth just going around all of us to say that.
Absolutely. This is a success of our time, and the sooner we protect our population, the better.
Yeah, and an absolute resounding yes from me as well. So the follow-on to that question that's come in, and I can come to you first for this, Peter, is there one particular COVID-19 vaccine that you think is best for immunosuppressed people, or people on immunosuppressant medications?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Of course, the true answer to that is we don't know. I think the important thing, and Nick has said this a couple of times already, is the first thing to think about is safety. Whilst the only vaccine that has been approved so far in the UK is the Pfizer vaccine, I would be surprised if the other vaccines don't get approved. And of course, that will not happen unless the safety data is absolutely robust. So that's one thing. The second part of that question, of course, is one of them going to be more effective than the others? And I'm afraid we simply don't know the answer to that. And there will be ongoing work to look at that. And some of the people on this chat indeed are, in fact, pretty much everyone on this chat is invested in trying to follow that up in one way or another with trials and things. There are potentially trials going on looking at mixes of the vaccines, actually perhaps having the Pfizer vaccine first and the Oxford vaccine second, or the other way around. So we will learn a lot to come, but I don't think we can answer that specific question yet, Charlie.
So Seb, a lot of questions coming in around timing and access. Can you give us some idea of when people at high risk will be given the vaccine? Do we know anything around this yet? What do we know?
I think it's a good question, Charlie. It's the best place to look at more details about that is in the Crohn's and Colitis UK, where they have posted the order in which currently our joint vaccination task force has recommended, as far as we understand currently, patients who are on very high vulnerable group, they are at group 4, and those are the ones who were on, if you like, the highest tier in our previous risk grid, which is also there on the Crohn's and Colitis UK website. The rest of the patients, the moderate risk category, they are on level 6. Whether this will get changed as the time evolves, I don't know, but at the moment that is what we have from the Joint Vaccine Task Force.
Yeah, thanks. So we think that as far as we're aware, and this is subject to the JCVI, that patients who are in the highest risk group go into category 4, and those in the moderate risk group go into category or grouping 6. And we expect, I think what we are seeing already is that the rollout is going to be really very fast across the UK. And I think, again, we are fortunate to be well placed through the NHS actually to be able to put this delivery out so very quickly indeed. Peter.
Okay, can I bring in a couple of questions here, Charlie, whilst you work out what to go to next? I think I might just quickly answer the first one myself. The question is, I can't take the flu vaccine as I had a negative effect. Can I have the COVID vaccine? And I think the answer to that would be you'll actually have to probably discuss that with either with your GP or whoever's giving you the vaccine, because it'll kind of depend probably on what that reaction was. And I think that's the other thing to say is, of course, there may be some people who can't have the vaccine for a specific reason, and that's understandable. Again, it's one of the other reasons that the more of us who do get vaccinated, the better, to protect people who can't have vaccines for whatever reason. But I've got a second question here. I'm going to throw it at Nick, because I've always admired Nick's ability to explain immunology to those of us who are not immunologists. So are you ready for this, Nick?
Yeah.
Again, I can understand where this is coming from, and I'm sure you'll be able to help explain, Nick. So the question is, if Crohn's is an autoimmune disease, and the vaccine's aim is actually to trigger an immune response against coronavirus, this person's saying they're scared that the vaccine will trigger an immune response and cause their disease to flare up.
Oh, first of all, thank you so much for that question, and what an interesting question it is as well. Great to hear those kind of questions. So it is a kind of autoimmune problem, or certainly a disease where your immune system is hyperactive and a little bit overly excited, and that's of course why we get IBD. Our gut is overly targeted by our immune system. I suppose the obvious answer to the question is we don't know yet, but you know, we've got to look a little bit at what we've seen so far from everything, other bit of data we've ever seen. And if you look at the history of vaccination in other patients with immune problems like Crohn's disease, like ulcerative colitis, like other autoimmune problems, there's been no evidence that having vaccination triggers a flare in your disease. It's not been seen many of the vaccinations where that's been studied before. So I'd take great comfort from that. I totally understand those kind of fears, but there's no evidence to suggest that would happen. Remember, these particles won't live in your body forever. Your body will probably eliminate them. We don't know in humans yet, of course. It's been studied in mice. The virus or the bits of the vaccine that gets into mice probably lasts about 10 days, and then it's gone forever. They don't incorporate into your DNA, nothing like that happens. So you generate an immune response against them. Your immune system is smart, it will remember the virus, and if it ever sees it again, it will generate either antibodies or some other cells called T cells. But the other thing that's really smart about the immune system is it's really specific. So if it recognizes a bug in your gut, then you may well get Crohn's disease. If it recognizes a bug that affects your airway, or in a vaccine, as in SARS-CoV-2, that'll be a different T cell, it'll be a different antibody. So it's very unusual for these things to cross-react. We've never seen it in other vaccines before. So I'd take great comfort from what we know already, I guess.
So I think it's worth just bearing in mind, just occurred to me whilst you were talking about that in terms of delivery of these vaccines. It's probably obvious, but I think it's worth restating. These vaccines are given by injection. It's a quick, simple jag. It should be more or less painless. The vaccines are not without potential side effects, but as far as we're aware, the side effects will be mild. So people might get a sore arm afterwards. They might feel just very slightly fluey afterwards, but the vaccine won't cause people to get the flu. A few people might have a short headache afterwards, but those minor side effects are minimal compared to getting COVID or having a severe COVID outcome. I have a couple of follow-on questions, specific questions I'm just going to throw out to you, all about priority and access. Lisa, question here. My son is 14 with Crohn's and is currently on steroids. Will he be able to have the vaccine?
So at the moment, the vaccine isn't licensed for use in children, although, as we said earlier, in the trials, children were included, and I believe it was sort of down, children as young as 12 were actually included within the studies. The license that's come through hasn't included children, so I suspect for now that would be a no.
Yeah, I think that's right. So in the Pfizer vaccine, as young as 12. As far as I'm aware, in the Oxford vaccine, I think the youngest age entered was 16. My understanding certainly is that there is no plan to vaccinate people under the age of 16 in the UK, at least. I think it is just worth re-emphasising this goes for Crohn's and colitis patients or people with Crohn's colitis, just the same as it does for people without, is that the risks from COVID-19 in kids is really negligible. It's not to say that there aren't case reports of kids getting severe disease, but it is very, very rare indeed. And so currently there is no plan for kids to be vaccinated. Seb, question for you here, very specific. I'm moderate risk. Am I on the priority list? I take azathioprine and adalimumab.
As we mentioned earlier, currently you will be at level 6, isn't it? That's the moderate risk category.
Yeah.
Whether that will change as the rest of the vaccine rollout goes, we don't know. But currently at level 6.
I'm afraid I've got another question for you here, Seb. So just on a similar topic, we certainly understand that the issuing around shielding and government letters caused people with IBD a huge amount of stress earlier in the year, and I'd just like to apologise again that wasn't any more straightforward than it was. Someone here says, I'm high risk but didn't receive a government letter. Will I be able to get on the vaccine priority list? These are the real concerns that people have. What could you say to that person, Seb? I guess that we should reassure them that they would be okay.
Yeah, I would really reassure that would be the case. And I think you should also contact your local IBD team, the IBD nurses. There is lots of information in Crohn's and Colitis UK, and I'm sure we are all here, since March, and Lisa is there in 3 places at one time, I'm sure. We will be there to fight your corner. Right from the beginning, Charlie has led this to fight the corner along with Crohn's and Colitis UK for our patients. So we'll be there right through this for you.
Thanks. Lisa, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that there obviously was a lot of distress and a lot of confusion caused by the way that the letters went out initially, and I recognise that was really challenging. It is important, I think, to use the tools. So certainly what we've been doing is getting people and signposting them to go and use the registry tool. And of course, we did a load of work at the beginning where we identified people who were in that sort of clinically or extremely clinically vulnerable group. Also bearing in mind that what we didn't want to do was confine people to, at the time, 12 weeks of social isolation. So it was really challenging. But IBD is a fluctuating condition, Crohn's and colitis, and so it could be that your particular situation has changed. And I would certainly recommend that if you think you should be on that high risk group, or conversely, if you think you shouldn't, go back and use the tool, the registry tool, and work out your risk. And then you can print off things that you can take to your GP and ask them to make sure that you get put on that government list. So although IBD teams and nurses, we're definitely here for you, one of the challenges we found is that our letters won't actually get you on that list. We do need to have you on that central list, and it may be worth using the resources that are available to do that and speaking to your GPs.
That was super, Lisa. Thank you very much. Really helpful. Nick, just going back to efficacy for a minute. So question here is, I take immunosuppressants. How will the vaccine work if I have a weakened immune system? Will it be less effective for me? And is it still worth getting?
It's a really good question and a really important one, I think, as well. The answer is we'll try and find that out as we start immunising IBD patients to try and answer that question exactly. What do we know from what we've seen with other vaccines? Well, if you look at the flu vaccine, approximately, particularly in people taking anti-TNF drugs, we do see some reduced antibody formation in that group of patients. And that's obviously important to know. However, it probably still provides a lot of protection. That's the thing to cite here. Whilst it might be a bit less effective, and there's certainly no proof of that yet, by the way, it probably does provide some protection. And interestingly, I'm comparing that to the flu vaccine, which I'd argue isn't one of the best vaccines in the world. You get 50–60% immunogenicity or antibody formation in the general population, whereas for these new vaccines that we're looking at, you also get 2 doses of them as well, by the way, of the new vaccines, which is that booster dose that really gets you up to speed. The protection in those studies, it's 95%. So these are probably much better vaccines, I would imagine. So the starting level at which you're protected is probably much higher to start with. And even if it is a little chunk of it's taken out because you're on anti-TNF therapy, which is one of the drugs we think might impact it, I still suspect it will offer some protection to you. And of course, as time goes on, we might learn of some strategies to deal with that, whether we give an extra jab to patients or a higher dose at some point, or a bunch of other different strategies that are being looked at the moment. So all is not lost, of course. And in the context of the rest of the population being immunized, then you will probably, I would imagine, have pretty good protection. So yes, it'd be better if it was brilliant in everyone, but anti-TNF is a pretty damn good drug for IBD. So, that's something to be really thankful for, I would say. And if it does hit you, and there's no guarantee it will, I still suspect it will provide some protection. So for my patients on anti-TNF, I'll be saying, crack on and get the vaccine. Let's get you protected as best we can.
So just to, sum that up briefly there, so thanks for that, Nick. The key issue here is that we think it's worth everybody with Crohn's and colitis getting vaccinated. It is just possible that some people who take, in particular we're talking about infliximab or adalimumab, the vaccine may be slightly less effective than people without. We still expect it to be effective, and it's just possible there may need to be some measures like an extra vaccine dose for those people, and we're going to look to see if we can answer those questions, but go ahead and get the vaccine anyway. Peter, following on from that, the question is, how will I know if the vaccine has worked for me? And specifically to feed into that, will we be tested for antibodies? You know, we can test if people have had COVID, right? We can do an antibody test to see if they've had it. It's not something we do routinely. We're much more, most of the testing that's done at the moment is the PCR tests and lateral flow tests to look to see if people actually have the infection to break the chains of transmission. But this is more now about after vaccination. What's your understanding about this here? What do we know so far?
Yeah, well, it's an unknown. Of course, as you said, there are antibody tests, and in fact, you can test for antibodies against different parts of the virus as well, and perhaps distinguish between immunization, vaccination, and infection. Whether this will become performed routinely or perhaps in specific groups of people, I don't think we know yet. When we think about population level vaccination in the UK, we were chatting about this very briefly before. I can't think of a vaccine where we routinely measure vaccine response over time. But as someone said when we were having that conversation, we're in a unique situation at the moment, and it may be that it is something that's done. Honestly, my hope is that it won't be necessary, because again, if we have an effective vaccination program, then the majority of the population will be immune, and it becomes less important. That's how most vaccination programs work. You accept that a small number of people, the vaccine won't work, or they can't have it for a specific reason. But who knows? You know, let's see what happens. And again, as you were saying, you know, we'll be following vaccine responses in cohorts of people, and it's pretty certain we'll be doing that in IBD patients taking treatments as well. So we will learn about this over the coming months.
So I've got some practical questions about what to do about getting the vaccine, and also what happens after having had the vaccine. So I'm just going to throw these out here, and whoever wants to can come in and answer. So JCVI has said that people who are immunosuppressed continue to follow government guidance on reducing the risk of infection even after you've received the vaccine. What does this mean, and for how long? So, you know, people with IBD, so let's say you've got a person with Crohn's disease on adalimumab, gets the vaccine. What should they do after they've been vaccinated? Who wants to take that? Nick, you look like you want to.
Sure.
I'm happy to respond.
Yeah, go Pete.
Well, I was just going to say that there's a couple of important points here. One is that we don't fully understand how effective vaccination is at preventing transmission. There are some data about this, but it may be that even after vaccination, you could still transmit the virus to other people if you were to catch it. And for that reason alone, it would be sensible for us to continue to follow government advice on protecting ourselves and others in terms of wearing masks and washing hands and avoiding close contact. Again, the hope is that the more quickly we can get the population vaccinated, the quicker those rules will be relaxed. But you know, what we don't want to see is breaking of those rules, and therefore surges in infection rates amongst the population, because people suddenly assume that it's all right to do that once they've been vaccinated. You know what? We want to make the most of this, and we want it to be effective, but we are still going to have to wait until it's safe for us to go back to normal life.
Yeah, it's an important point, isn't it? Particularly right now, you know, we're not in a terrible position in the UK, and that's not been without, you know, hard work and compromise in many areas. And I think we want to be able to continue to be in a good position moving forward. So just to emphasize again to everyone, the daily rules and things that we've got used to now, to continue whilst we wait patiently. Nick, did you want to come in with something else to add on this?
I mean, I echo all of that. I think the government will give pretty clear guidance, you know, and they're always responsive to the data. If the R rate starts to plummet as we all get vaccinated, then actually we all will return to our normally lives and our normal practice. So that's the incentive for us all to get on with this important public health exercise, I think, so that R rate plummets and we all get back to normal, everybody.
Yeah, so hold fast as we are just now, keep doing what we're doing, rather than say vaccines are coming, we'll just ditch all the rules now. So we definitely urge people to hold steady just now. I think that's really important. I guess that's a plea for us as NHS workers more than anything. Seb, a question for you. After I have the vaccine, will I be okay to return to work? I work in healthcare and can't socially distance.
Yeah, at the moment, provided we are following all the precautions what you take in relation, before the vaccine came along the way, I think going back to work is perfectly acceptable. What I would add to what we discussed earlier is that what we understand now is that it is a couple of weeks after the second dose where your best immune response or antibodies are coming. So just because you got the jab tomorrow, I would still strongly advocate that we continue those public health measures which we have been doing so well, particularly our IBD patients have been doing and the country have been doing so well for that period at the very minimum, and then we will have further guidance at that stage.
Thanks, Seb. Peter, did you have a question?
Yeah, there's a couple that we haven't answered on the chat here. And I think one of them is really important. And apparently lots of people are confused that some places are reporting that immunosuppressed people can't have vaccines. I assume that means this vaccine. We do know, obviously, that some people can't have live vaccines, but these aren't live vaccines. Can we re-clarify this, please?
Yes, go on, Nick. Restate this as simply and straightforward as you can, because I think you're best placed to do
it's
this.
quite the opposite. If anything, people who are immunosuppressed will be on the priority list. They're up that scale. Healthy individuals with no medical problems, taking no drugs, will be way down that list. So it's quite the opposite. We only know, first of all, for the Pfizer vaccine, of course, but we're anticipating it for all the others. You'll be able to use them if you're immunosuppressed. You need them if you're immunosuppressed, and you'll be prioritized probably because you're immunosuppressed. So it's quite the opposite, I would say.
Yeah, there's very few examples for IBD patients where live vaccines are routinely used, and it probably is worth just restating those here. So commonly this situation comes up with pregnant mums who are on anti-TNF therapy, where we ask for no live vaccines in the infant for the first 6 months. So that typically means vaccination against rotavirus is withheld for 6 months. And then the other common situation that we come across now actually is with vaccines against herpes zoster, where there are a couple of caveats around that as a live vaccine. I don't know if there are any other particularly burning other examples people want to give, but for the most part, I think that may be contributing to some of the confusion.
MMR, yellow fever, rabies.
One day, hopefully, it'll be the travel vaccines again, won't it? But yeah.
Most that aren't given to people regularly, but yes.
Right. Can I just ask the last question that we haven't answered yet? It's a bit of a tricky one. The question is, I've heard that there's another treatment coming for people who are immunosuppressed and can't have vaccines. Does this apply to us? Nick, you're nodding like I'm not sure I know the answer to this.
So that for people who are severely immunosuppressed, so people whose immune system has been completely wiped out or can't generate antibodies whatsoever, there might be some other treatments, particularly antibodies that have already been generated against the virus. So reagents like that, so hyperimmune, so serum from a patient who's been infected, for instance, before, and those kind of things that when you would put that into somebody else, that could offer protection to you. So it's unlikely that that's going to apply to very many, if any, IBD patients at all. If it is, it will be a tiny, weeny fraction. It's not, patients taking anti-TNF, azathioprine, vedolizumab, ustekinumab, tofacitinib. It's none of those things that this will likely apply for. It'll be people with other medical problems that has caused their immune system to basically break down altogether. So I don't envisage that being an issue for our patients, other than a tiny weeny fraction of some very specialist patients that have got something other than just IBD, I expect.
I've got a few questions here that I want to soak up just now. Lisa, is it okay to have the vaccine on the same day as my adalimumab injection?
So yes, in theory, there shouldn't be a reason why you can't do that. You might want to try and juggle things around a little bit so that you're not having 2 jabs on the same day. You could take your adalimumab injection a day later or so, and that wouldn't necessarily cause too much harm. But it's not going to affect the efficacy of the medication or the vaccine, as far as
And is it okay to have the vaccine when I'm in the middle of a flare-up? I would say, again, yes, no problems there at all. All the more reason perhaps to get on and have the vaccine in that situation. Do I need the vaccine if I've had coronavirus already? This is, again, I'm going to come to you there, Nick, because it's an immunological question. I mean, the answer to this is yes, you should have it anyway. That's the simple answer. But perhaps, Nick, you can elaborate on this a little bit from an immunological perspective.
Sure. I mean, absolutely. So in the trials, actually, there were a few patients who'd had been exposed to the virus already, and they figured that out when they did the blood tests, and it was totally safe in those patients. So should be advised. And of course, it may even give you that extra boost just in case you were, slightly less immune than you'd like to have been. And that's a risk for all of us, of course, in the world. It'll give you even more of a boost. So you'll probably be super protected. So it's safe as far as we know. Certainly that's what it's seen in all the trials, and probably even better.
Seb, how long will the vaccine protect me for? $1 million question, I guess.
Absolutely. That's absolutely something what we don't know at the moment. And we have to be honest about it and acknowledge that we don't know how long, because our so far data, what has been presented is only, is it 3 months or so, Charlie, follow-up period after the second dose. So how long, we don't know. Whether that is different in IBD patients, we don't know. So these things will come out when the vaccination program rolls out.
Okay, I'm going to go round. We've pretty much dealt all the questions. I'm going to give you all an opportunity just to say a final comment around things, starting with you, Seb. Just a final comment.
Yeah, I would say that getting vaccine is a choice, but I will choose to have the vaccine. I will encourage my patient to choose vaccine, because at the end of the day, the choice of not taking the vaccine is also not risk-free. I can understand there are concerns about the risk, but the choice of not taking the vaccine is not only risk-free for you, but also for other people in the community and your family. So I will strongly encourage to take the vaccine.
Lisa, final comments?
Yeah, just that I hope this has been useful. I guess all the questions and all the comments and concerns that I've heard from patients are completely valid and completely reasonable. But hopefully this has given you a little bit of reassurance and using all the information that's out there to make that decision, as Seb says, for you and others.
Nick?
Thanks, Charlie. So again, just to thank everyone for taking an interest in this. I think it's a really important subject. I think it's a great victory, and I think we all need to embrace this and get ourselves protected as soon as we can from what's been a devastating illness, and I embrace it fully.
Thanks, Nick. And Peter, final comments?
Yeah, and I think the other thing we can't forget is, what we have been through as individuals, what many people with inflammatory bowel disease in particular have been through in terms of shielding and disruption to life. And I'm really looking forward to life returning to normal sooner rather than later. And I think vaccination is undoubtedly the way we're going to get there most quickly.
Thanks, Peter. I echo all of those thoughts. It's been an extraordinary year. We keep saying it. There is no other way to say it. And for it to feel like it finishing on a positive note has to be good. And this is genuinely a good news story. It's a victory for science. It's a victory for us. And for people with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, we have now a vaccine, a range of vaccines that we look like being effective and that we believe are safe, and we urge you all to get vaccinated when you are called to do so. So with that, I want to thank Seb, Nick, Peter and Lisa very much indeed for giving up your evenings to join us. I understand there are over 1,000 of you watching online live with us tonight, so thank you very much indeed for taking the time. Please do point others back to the Facebook page if you believe they will want to come and pay us a visit and watch the video back. This will also go up onto YouTube in a day or so. I know quite a lot of people now aren't on Facebook, and that's another way for people to be able to watch this conversation. We will come back in due course as and when there is more information to share. Please keep an eye on the information pages on the Crohn's and Colitis UK website. The team there are doing a tremendous job this year of keeping up to date with a very fast pacing and changing situation. So the information there is bang up to date and reliable. So a huge kudos to them for doing that. Thank you very much. And thanks to them for hosting this tonight. So it's bang on 7 o'clock. I'll leave you to all go and have your dinner. Thanks very much for joining us. Please stay safe and check back to us in due course as and when we have updates. Okay, good night. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.